Hey guys, it's Anthony from Watchmaker. We're going to be talking about decoding the timing results. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, usually when watchmakers service a mechanical watch, we usually get something that's a timing result. So you're going to see something that looks like this here. Okay, uh, do we always provide it to the client in the industry? No. Should we? I believe so. If you're working with any independent watchmaker, they should be providing you stuff like this. If not, you should also mention that up front. Prior to getting your watch serviced, you should mention if they provide any timing slips. And generally, if you ask that up front, they will be more than inclined to provide it for you. If you're going to a manufacturer or a brand, more than likely sometimes that's a different story. Sometimes they will be less inclined to provide that for you since that's outside of brand policy. So we're just going to move on forward with this, okay? So before we get into all this, we need to understand a couple core details, right? There are three main things we need to talk about. We need to talk about amplitude, right? So what is amplitude? Think of the amplitude as the heartbeat of your watch. Think of amplitude as your heart rate. If you were to compare it to a human being, the amplitude would be your heart rate. It should always be ideally around 275 to about 315 degrees. So let me see if I have a timer result sheet for you here. So if we look at this, ignore this slide for a second, but this is usually what a timing slip will entail, right? So the very first thing we want to pay attention to is amplitude, okay? So the amplitude here would indicate the heart rate of your watch, right? So if we were to look at, again, back up here, the amplitude, the acceptable amplitude would be 275 to 315. Anything lower than 275 is not ideal, and anything higher than 315 is considered too high, right? If it's around 320, you can generally let it slide, right? It's not like a hard hit or miss 275 and 315, okay? So think of amplitude again as your heart rate. So you don't want it too low, you don't want it too high. Think of beat error as the way your mind is, right? If your mind is mentally clear, if your mind is free of stress, if your mind is, if you're not worrying about anything, then you should be pretty set in terms of your day-to-day functions. So the beat error, we always want it to be 0, 0. The closer it is to 0, the better. Okay, any higher than 0.2, in my opinion, is venturing off into the unacceptable territory, if you ask me. Now, other brands have a acceptable tolerance of maybe 0.5 and higher, but generally here, what we would do is we keep it between 0.0 to 0.2 maximum. Okay. Again, beat error is how well the watch is going to function mentally, right? Now, next, the rate. This is the most important one. I mean, all three of these are relatively important, but this is generally what the clients would see, for example, right? The rate should always be around 0 to 8 seconds, give or take, right? Generally, we generally try to keep it 0 to 2. We want to keep the rate as close together as possible. But for example, if sometimes we get clients who come in and say, my watch is running slow, my watch is running fast, we will usually look at the rate to take a look at if that is really the case, because the rate is what will let us know actually how much time the watch is supposed to be gaining or losing according to our machine, right? So for example, if you come in and if you come into the doctor and you're telling the doctor that, hey, I feel like my blood pressure is XYZ, and we check your blood pressure, but the blood pressure machine shows something contrary to what you're telling us. This is exactly what the rate would essentially be. The rate, if you are telling us that the watch is running slow or fast, when we look at the machine, the rate will let us know if it is indeed running fast or slow. We can always adjust the rate, right? So we can always make it higher or lower, but generally the rate is what determines how much time the watch is going to gain or lose in a day. assuming the amplitude and the beat error are all okay. Okay, so again, the three major takeaways from here is the amplitude, the beat error, and the rate. Okay, everything else other than that is just simply terminology, right? So if we take a look down here again, right, did I miss it? Right here. This is essentially what you're going to see on a timing result, right? So again, is there anything wrong here? You know what I mean? If you take a look at this, do you see any or spot anything wrong? Okay. Now the amplitude doesn't look too high, right? But here's a big. That's a little worrisome to me personally. So the rate looks relatively within specifications, right? The beat error is not the best, but it is certainly better than a lot of watches. I would prefer to keep all these to 0 or 1, if you ask me. But a lot of factors come into play: the age of the watch, etc. Right? But if it's a brand new watch, it's a relatively new watch, all this should be fixable. So 332. Why does 332 worry me? If we look at a circle, all right, that's a terrible circle. From 0 to 360, that's one full circle. Now, if we look at the amplitude of a watch, we're actually looking at the balance wheel. If the balance wheel spins 360 degrees, it literally goes for a full circle. If it goes full circle, you're going to have an extra beat in your watch, and your watch is not going to be on time. So generally, we try to keep it around 275 or 315 and then have it go right back, right? So again, anything higher than 315, if that sounded too complicated to you, if anything higher than 315, you should be worried about it. 320, I'm not too concerned about, but 330 is when we're venturing into rebanking territory. So what that means is that your watch might come back prematurely. Okay, so that's one of the biggest issues here. Okay, now, okay, if we take a look over here, and on this material, if we look at the PDF here, if you have a chance, you can download it in the description below. But I also go over a lot of this stuff written down here. But amplitude, beat error, rate. These are the biggest three things you need to be paying attention to whenever you're looking at a timing sheet. If you don't have a timing sheet, or if you're unaware of a timing sheet, I can produce a couple, templates for you guys. But if you download this PDF here, it's really, really in depth about everything in terms of timing and decoding timing. What causes low amplitude, how to spot for pivots, beat error, the description of it, how we adjust the beat error, how we adjust the rate, the delta, more and more info. Okay, so just scroll down, take a look at it, and let me know what you think. And also, if you look at the PDF file here, we even have multiple examples here for you to really take a look at, simplified, broken down information. I think you guys will really enjoy it.